When you put people before you and you serve them and you care for them and you put them in a position of success, when promotional opportunities come, they push you up. And so that's how you get noticed by the big bosses, is because your people are pushing you up.
Right.
And that's how you stand above the crowd. And that's what kept happening to me. The more I invested in others, the more I put others before myself, they kept pushing me up. And I kept getting noticed by my bosses. And that was transformative for me. And that really put me on a track of, Steve, the reason you've been placed on this earth, you have a gift, helping others be successful. Focus on that and your success will come. Well, think about my life in three parts. Mark Twain has a quote: the two most important days in your life, the day you're born, the second is when you know why. For a kid that grew up in the housing projects of Indianapolis, Indiana, with a single mother, you don't reach this position unless a lot of people are giving you a hand up, not a handout, Greg, but a hand up. So I realized my purpose is really creating this table of prosperity for as many people as possible. So I'm involved in business. I serve on the board of 3 public companies. I continue to help Comcast, a special counsel, which is really about leadership development, coaching, helping them identify the right talent for the team. Number 2 is finding a way to give back. I serve on the board of New Leaders, which focuses on the leadership development of public school principals. Delta Boulay, which is the largest African-American male organization. We focus on scholarships for kids. And then I support my family. My wife is an ordained minister. She has a prison ministry, so I support her ministry. And then obviously raising a 10-year-old boy. How many young kids get to have dad around for quite a bit of time?
You know, you were just beginning to tell the story about sort of your upbringing, and I love the way you define that, which is like, you know, part of what has allowed me to be successful is a help up. Is that the way you describe it?
A hand up. I call it a hand up.
A hand up versus you know, just what was the other one? Hand down or helping?
A handout. And Greg,
handout.
The difference is a handout is, hey, I'm going to give you something to help you in this moment. A hand up says, you know what? I'm going to give you an opportunity for you to put your full talent on display. And I'm going to give you an opportunity to win the job, not lose the job, or win the opportunity. And that's all anyone can ask is, give me a shot, put me in the game, coach. And that's all we can ask. And there have been so many people who have given me an opportunity to display my talent.
Right. And what's so cool about that, and you know, I hear you saying this, and I'll go there. There's such responsibility that you have to then work hard, and you take that hand up and do something with it, double it, multiply it, like, you know, use that as a launching pad. And it's such an important lesson in life. And I think people make the mistake by, you know, describing this like work ethic, right? I don't think it is work ethic. I think that's one of the outcomes we get from this mindset of like, I have accountability to be successful, not just for myself, but for the people that see the success in me. Would you agree?
Greg, I love what you just said there. One of my favorite quotes is a Mark Twain quote. The quote goes like this: the 2 most important days in your life is the day you're born. The second is when you know why. And once you identify your purpose, your reason for being on this earth, very rarely is it about you. It is always about someone else. And for a kid like me that grew up in the housing projects of Indianapolis, a single mother with an 8th grade education, her first job when she left my dad, she was cleaning motel rooms. And that's motel with an M, not hotel with an H. There's no spa. There's no in-room dining. It is as bare as you can possibly get it. So how does a kid accomplish something in life other than people giving him an opportunity? And I thought my purpose in life, I thought the reason I was placed on this earth, Greg, was to ensure that my family was no longer in poverty. No, that was not my purpose. My purpose was, how do I create a table of prosperity for as many people as possible? That's why I was so blessed with so many hand ups versus handouts, so I could pay it forward. So I love your comment about accountability. It's usually about someone else, never about you.
Right. What were some of those early hand ups? I mean, what were some of those experiences, and who were those people?
Well, let's start with my mother. We were in a situation where it was not a healthy relationship for my father and I. And I love my father. He's no longer with us. But she made the very difficult decision. She had a marriage license, but didn't even have a driver's license. So the first hand up was her saying, my purpose on this earth is how do I make sure these four little boys grow up to be productive citizens and contributors to society versus subtracting from society. That was a huge hand up. I was a basketball manager. I love sports, and I was just not good enough to make the basketball team because it was the largest high school in the state of Indiana. 5,300 kids, Greg. In my class, there were 1,200 kids. And so we had a lot of great basketball players. But a guy named Coach Ernie Hudson said, would you like to be the manager? You're not going to make the team, but I like your leadership skills. Would you like to be the basketball manager? And at the time, that was not a cool thing because they called us ball boys, but we made it a cool job. That was a critical opportunities. Alice Goodrum, I was in her speech class and she saw something in me and she started giving me opportunities as a high school junior and senior. So those are examples. Then I go to Indiana University and I meet a professor, Dr. William Wiggins, who would invite me into his home so I could see what a healthy relationship looked like between a man and a woman. I could see how he interacted with his daughter. I could see what a father was like. Those are unique opportunities. But probably, Greg, the most transformative was early in my career, I got fired. I came out of Indiana University. I was on the fast track. I was the youngest sales manager in the history of this company called American Hospital Supply. I'm leading a group of men and women. A year into the job, my boss flies to Michigan and fires me on the spot and said, you're not leading properly. The results are not there. The same day, a gentleman by the name of Darnell Martin called me and said, Steve, I see more in you than you see in yourself. So I'm going to give you an opportunity. But if you continue to manage and lead the way you're currently leading, you're not going to be successful. But I'm going to bring you here. I'm going to let you work under me so you can see what people leadership is all about. I'm going to show you what it's like to put people before you and make you last. I'm going to show you that. That was transformative, Greg, for me and put me on the right track going forward.
So I want to come back to this question after, which is just the male figures in your life, because you mentioned that your father and you didn't have a good relationship. But before we go there, you got fired because your manager showed up and said, I don't like the way you're managing and leading and you're not delivering the results. What were you not doing, or what were you doing that transition? What were they, in other words, like what did this new experience show you around people leadership?
Well, I thought it was all about me. I'm the leader. Look at me. I'm in charge. You listen to me. And so therefore I was talking to them versus listening to them. I thought my purpose in life was to ensure my family was no longer in poverty. So I was only thinking about me and my career. And so I was not feeding my people. I was not caring for them. I was not putting them first. I was not listening to them. It was all about me. And during that process, that's when my vision for my life came into greater focus, that if I put people before me, my success would happen. Let me share this with you, Greg, because people often say, Steve, how do you go from being a sales manager to president of Comcast West, leading 30,000 employees, almost $20 billion in revenue? And here's what happens, Greg. When you put people before you and you serve them and you care for them and you put them in a position of success, when promotional opportunities come, they push you up. And so that's how you get noticed by the big bosses, is because your people are pushing you up.
Right.
And that's how you stand above the crowd. And that's what kept happening to me. The more I invested in others, the more I put others before myself, they kept pushing me up. And I kept getting noticed by my bosses. And that was transformative for me. And that really put me on a track of, Steve, the reason you've been placed on this earth, you have a gift. helping others be successful.
Hmm.
Focus on that and your success will come.
That's probably the best definition I've heard of leadership, and it's someone else said it recently, similar, which is the difference between management and leadership, right? Management, yes, you want to ensure the execution of the tasks and things are being done and supervised and stuff like that, but leadership is ensuring that you're equipping people to be successful, whether that
That's
be.
exactly right, Greg. You said it so well. Can I add one other little nuance to that? A manager gets excited about their success. A leader takes joy in the success of others.
Right.
It fills you up, man. I'm telling you, you can achieve a lot of success on your own. It's empty. Right. But when you've got these little branches hanging off your tree of success all over the world, all over the country, that fills you up with the level of satisfaction that's unmatched.
Right. You know, what you're talking a lot about is the difference between self-orientation and others orientation. And we all live with that balance. But, you know, I think the danger is through people's, call it negative experiences and negative relationships and challenges and pitfalls and, you know, the stuff that knocks you down. If they're not careful, they tend to become quite slighted by that and move into the self-orientation sort of model, which is, what am I getting out of this? And what about me and me first? And, you know, you remind me of a story many years ago. And what I should also share with you, when I started in the industry, my father was the one that started the company, right? So for many years, I was just doing the motions of work. It's very successful. But then all of a sudden, there was this opportunity for me to start my own thing, right? And it was a technology training business. And it had a lot to do with Apple. We represented Apple and a few other sort of big players. And it was just an amazing time, you know, building this business, building the team, having success. And, you know, it all went. And I had these couple guys that were with me. They were like sort of key parts of this. And the one guy said, look, you know, I want to be partner in the business. And for me, I was like, fuck, of course, sure, let's go do it. Ran off to the lawyers and said to them, hey, create partnership agreements, right? And the lawyer said to me, he says, listen, man, like, don't do a partnership agreement, do a profit share. I was like, no. Like, we all need to sort of share the pie. And I think ownership and accountability is really what's driving this one guy. Anyway, we get through all the details, and you know, these things take quite some time with corporate legal. We finally get there, and I sit down with him. I say, okay, here's the shareholder agreement. Here's the partnership agreement. But by the way, the lawyer suggested maybe we should just do profit share, because like, you get the money anyway. And why, like, would you consider that? And he's like, no. And I was like, well, tell me more. Why? What are some of the reasons you want to be partner versus just sort of sharing in the spoils of the business? He's like, well, I want to be an executive. You know, I want to be able to golf when I want to golf. I want to be able to do my own thing. I want to be able to, like, you know, get my direction put forward. And I'll never forget this. Like, I had this sort of shocking sort of moment with him, which is like, oh my God. I'm like, is that what you think this is about? You think like the leadership and the partner and the ownership, like it's you. Let me show you the other side of this. This is the dirty, nasty, challenging side. Like, if you want this, you got to be responsible to take this. Yes. He was like, no, I don't want that part. And that was the beginning of the end of the relationship. We also ended up selling that company and moving on. But that was my PhD, or call it MBA, in partnerships.
Yeah, what a valuable lesson, Greg. And what I really enjoy about that story is, in life, we will make mistakes. The key is, don't keep making the same mistake. And the fact that you keep that story top of mind for you is a reminder as you interact with people what to be conscious of.
Right. There's that great saying, which says, you could say God or the universe will give you the lessons you need to learn. And when you don't learn them, God or the universe will give it to you again and again and again. And it's a responsibility we have to learn. You know, early days in the personal development space, or in the business that we're in, on day one, the first thing you teach, and it's an exercise, and it's a little bit of an exercise that tricks people and shows people that they weren't listening and paying attention, and they make a mistake. And, you know, we don't really do this anymore in the program, but it was like one of the core pieces. And the first line we taught was, there's no substitute for taking responsibility. That then themed into your personal growth. You're gonna have to take responsibility for. You have to take responsibility for managing your relationships and your communication and your emotions. And responsibility. And like, as I'm sitting here and talking to you, man, and we got onto it, which is like that hand up and what the responsibility is. This is what is just reminding me of all of this, right? We have such a responsibility in life. So let me ask you this. In today's climate, the world that we live in today, do you think we have the same mindset of people taking the hand up, or are we just looking for the handout?
Well, I think everything starts, Greg, with purpose. You and I were talking earlier about your purpose and what you're trying to do, making humans better humans. I mean, that is a big, bodacious purpose in life. And so therefore, what you do does not feel like work. You feel like this is your calling and this is what you're doing. Right. And so we see people not facing up and answering that question. And so as a result, we see a lot of, let's take social media. Mm-hmm. You're popular based on the number of likes. You're right. Popular based on the number of followers. Think about it, Greg, the more outrageous you are, the dumber the things you say, that's how you generate followers. And so it's this mindset that I need satisfaction, endorsement from someone else, whether it's through likes or whatever. But once you realize what your purpose is, you don't need that third-party endorsement to say you're on the right track. And so this idea of taking radical responsibility, I'm building on your phrase of responsibility. I'm going to add the word radical.
I love that, man.
You're in charge of you, not someone else. And somehow we've lost this, that this idea that I'm in my situation based on what someone has done to me. When we were cleaning motel rooms, my mom said, don't allow your environment. Yes, you're cleaning motel rooms now, but don't allow this to shape who you are or how you think about the world. And so this idea that you own you is something that I believe we need to talk about more, because more and more people believe someone has done something to them. And that's why they're in their situation. Life is not fair, Greg. Let's be honest. Even if you were born very wealthy, let me share a story. Brian Roberts, who is the chairman CEO of Comcast. Comcast is $100+ billion company, one of the top 20 companies in America, global company. His dad started the company. Think about the pressure he had, because he is the son of the founder. Now, he could sit here and say, well, you know what? People aren't being fair to me because I'm the boss's son, but he went out and earned that credibility. He worked hard, and he took this little small company his dad started, and he, with a lot of help from a lot of leaders, built this into one of the top 20 companies in America. So no matter what situation you're in, you can always play the victim role. You really can. It is your responsibility to take whatever skills you've been given and go make it happen. Because I truly believe, Greg, I believe this in my heart, that opportunities are there. You just have to be aware enough to recognize it when it's presented to you.
Correct. And
just like our listeners today who are listening to this podcast, this is one of those opportunities. My hope is someone will benefit from this conversation, and it will transform them in a way that puts them on the right path.
Right. You know, when you're telling the story, his name is Brian?
Brian Roberts.
Brian Roberts, right? There's that saying, which is the first generation starts it, the second generation builds it, right? We won't talk about the third generation. But
sometimes they destroy it.
Sometimes they destroy it. But, you know, back to that, like I do also a lot of work with like generational organizations, and I come from family business. And if you're not careful, right, you misfire in those types of environments. But if you're radically responsible and aware, right, you walk into that place like, all right, I got to earn everything, right?
That's exactly right, Greg. I love that. You know, one of the things you said, Greg, that I want to share with our listeners, I started off our conversation today. I said, are you winning or losing? And you said, Steve, I'm always winning. And I threw and I added on to that, said, look, if you're not winning, you're learning. So there's no such thing as losing in life. So whatever your situation is, look for the learning and the insight and the knowledge to propel you to your real calling in life. So when you said, hey, Steve, I'm always winning, even if you're having a tough day, there's a jewel of there's something there. There's a nugget you can take out of that difficult day.
1,000%, 1,000%. It's something I've always done. I was just thinking, I have a line. I've never shared this, but like when it doesn't matter what happens, specifically when something challenging happens, I'll always say, it's meant to be, meant to be. Right. This is just part of the path. This is either the obstacle I got to get over, or this is the booster that is going to set me down. But it's part of the journey, right? And it'll contribute, it'll help, it'll direct, it will force. It's there, right? And to resist that, I think, is where people go wrong, right? Is because then maybe it's an insecurity, and there's just this need to not feel pain or stress, I think, in today's world. And I've been preaching this a lot in programs lately, which is stress is good. Stress is very good for you. Prolonged stress, unexpressed emotion, internalized stress, that stuff is unhealthy and will eat you away. But the stressful events is super healthy for you. The stressful conversation, the stressful decision, right? The stressful action is super healthy for you. I want to come back to your father, if you're up for it, because you mentioned.
Yes.
So your parents get divorced. How old were you?
I was 10 when they got a divorce. Started off great. My father started drinking. He was an alcoholic, and he died very early, essentially from over drinking himself to death. But my mother had the insight to say, well, yes, I do believe it's important for 4 boys to have their father. But at the end of the day, this is not a healthy situation. So she moves from Florida to Indianapolis, Indiana, where she held a brother. And Greg, she had a marriage license, but didn't even have a driver's license. This was a time when a majority of women would stay at home, and while she held some odd jobs, her primary role was in the house. Yeah. And so she had to learn to be an adult. She had to learn to be the provider. And so we were learning as we go. And he passed away at obviously a very young age, and we're disappointed he never had a chance to get see our success. But here's the thing I took away from him. He was an incredible worker, hard worker, provided for his family. He took that responsibility. He just lost his way and couldn't find his way back. So the good news here is that he provided, a role model for me, particularly around work ethic and responsibility and caring for your family.
Right. So important, because my question was going to be, as a male figure in your life growing up, like who were the male figures, and how much of like an imprint did your father have on you, positive and negative? And it sounds very positive, right?
Yeah, very, very positive, but also, it gave me a clear sense of addiction and all of this. But the biggest learning that I took, Greg, and I shared this with my 10-year-old son, the 5 or 6 people, Greg, that you spend the majority of your time with, that is who you will become. And in my dad's case, things started off great, but he started hanging out with a group of people. Now, he has ultimate responsibility. We're not passing the buck here, but he created an environment of 7 or 8 men and women that he would always be around. And the constant that connected them was alcohol. And ultimately, that's what he became. And so I am very conscious. I'm always taking inventory. I share this with my son. The most important decision you will make is who you surround yourself with, because that's who you'll become. I don't care how strong you are. That's what you will become. And that was probably one of those most critical lessons I learned later in life, certainly as I reflected on my dad and why things didn't work out. That became very clear to me.
Yeah, I've been talking about this a lot lately. There's a cool book called Tribe of Millionaires. That's the concept, which is who you are around is who you become, right? And it's a little bit of a marketing promotion for, I think, their peer-to-peer coaching group, which is called, I think, Go Abundance. But again, a tribe of millionaires. I have this conversation with my wife all the time. My daughter is now 9. I see her getting older, and it's now maybe 9, 10, 11. This is now the next phase of conversations, which is, you got to be aware of your decisions that you make and who you hang around with. And, there's that wonderful old saying, which is, if you hang around with poop, you end up smelling like poop.
It is so true because, Greg, I'm sure you'll agree with it. The men and women that are around you, or boys and girls, depending on your age, there's no middle ground. They're either pouring into you in a positive way or they're taking away. There's no such thing as no impact. It's one or the other.
Right.
And boy, it's healthy for all of us to do an inventory. Where are you spending your time? And you talked about your 9-year-old. My son, Stevie, is 10. Today, we pick their friends. But at some point here, very soon, they'll start picking their own friends.
Right.
And hopefully we've done a good enough job of showing what's right and what's wrong.
Right. There's I was just chatting about this with my wife recently. There's new research. So there's research out there that's now saying that the kids younger and younger are now starting to lean into their peer group for advice. Now, when we grew up in up until you were about 14 or 15, you were really in the family nucleus, right? Like it was your brothers and your mom that you trusted the most. You went, hey, and you went and you asked those questions and you shared things with them and stuff like that. And then as you got older and you start to come out of that in teenagehood, you want to start to, build your personality outside of the family. You want to test that personality up against the world now, right? And now peers become really important to you, right? We all know this from the ages of that 14, 15 to 18, your friends are everything, right? But at that point, your brain's developed a little more, right? There's more of an ability to go, oh, well, hold on, this kind of pushes up against some of my beliefs or values. Right. And the danger in the world that we're living today, including because of social media, is you're getting 9-year-olds telling and leaning into their peer groups more than their actual families. And it's really, really important that, that's what my wife was talking a lot about, which is you create an environment of warmth and nurturance and safety. Yes. So they're going to feel safe coming and having these conversations with you. And as parents, we're fast today, right? We're moving at quick speeds.
Yeah. It's interesting, your purpose in life is, how do we make humans better humans? One of the things we don't give enough time to, we're conscious of what we eat, but are we conscious of what we put inside of us through social media and all of what we watch on TV and all this? If you're not careful, boy, all of this stuff starts to infiltrate you, and you wake up one day and that's your imaginary friend, right? Remember how you used to grow up and kids would have imaginary friends? Well, guess what? It's real. And sometimes it's through social media, or maybe it's the TV show you're watching, or whatever that is constantly pouring into you. And if you're not careful, toxic stuff is coming inside of you, and it will impact you in a way that you can't even imagine.
Yeah, well, that's the famous old story with the news, right? It's the big shocking headline that you're like, oh, let's watch the news, right? It's not like, hey, by the way, we rescued a bunch of pigeons today, and right? No one cares about that. They shock, and obviously algorithms will feed you what you're looking at. Yeah, I was chatting. I just had Dr. Joe Vitale on the show. We were just chatting earlier. And we came and we were talking about this, and another guy once saying the line is, you are either being programmed or you are programming yourself. And if you're not careful, you're programming yourself with the wrong info and content and media. As we say in Costa Rica, no bueno. All right, let's come back to leadership, because this is what's really interesting. I mean, I live in the world of leadership development, as I was saying, and to build a culture, to build an organization where we can have great leaders which are contributing to, again, that culture and that community. What were some of your practices as heading up this organization? I mean, once again, it was 30,000 people.
30,000 people.
Close to 20 billion in revenue.
Yes.
So how are you in that sort of, head leadership executive position how are you instilling that message? How are you instilling your practices throughout that organization?
Such a great question. And the first thing everyone has to realize is I can't personally lead 30,000 people. It sounds great on a piece of paper, sounds great on a resume, but you can't lead 30,000 people. But so therefore, you have to define what is your circle of influence. So in my case, my circle of influence was our top 100 leaders, all vice presidents. And so let's talk about how we did it. Number one, everything starts with role modeling the behavior that you expect from others. And let me say that again, because people are watching when you don't even think they're watching, they're watching. And so what I would do, Greg, is I identify within the West Division of those 30,000 employees, there were 33 employees at every level that I said, you're my accountability coach. If you see me out of line, or if I'm not walking the right way, if I'm not behaving the way I should, I give you full accountability to hold me accountable, because people will watch what I say, they will listen to what I say, but they're going to watch and emulate my actions more than anything. So that's number one. Number two, I was very involved in the hiring process of those top 100 leaders, because without me saying anything, Greg, who we hire, who we put in charge, who we give responsibility says everything about who we are. Mm-hmm. So are these men and women, we have a shared vision around values and what's important? So that was the second thing. Number three, we tried to build our reward system that rewarded the behavior that we expected from our leaders. And in our case, it was all about team. It was not about it was about us and we and together. And so we found ways to reward that behavior through promotions, through incremental dollars, through recognition. We tried to reward that. So it just kind of became, something that we regularly did. And number four, one of the things that I did on an annual basis, I would do 80 to 85. So essentially a third of the year, I would do focus groups. So throughout the organization, I would just randomly pick 10 to 12 employees so we could sit around either in person or virtually to have a conversation around values, what's important. And if they play back to me what I believe is our value system, that tells me that we're on the right track. But in some cases, they played back something to me that was foreign to me. And that gave me some sense, at least in this part of our organization, we were not getting the message out, and we needed to kind of bring in some incremental planning. So those are just 4 or 5 tactics that I use to help us build a culture that was aligned around what's right and what's wrong.
So simple, so difficult, right? But it's the pillars. I love what you said about role modeling.
Yes.
As parents, as teachers, as leaders, the most effective tool for coaching, for teaching, for developing is role modeling the behavior you want to see. Act and behave and show up. Most people will go like, okay, I'm gonna follow what I see you doing as you described versus follow what you're telling me to do. Right?
That's exactly right, Greg. That's right. Exactly. Can I add one point to that?
Yeah.
The point I forgot to mention with the role modeling is consistency.
Correct.
Because I used to have a boss and everybody would come in the morning and say, did bad Greg show up or good Greg show up? So now all of a sudden, everybody's focused on the boss's mood and not focused on customers and moving the business forward. Right. So be consistent in your approach. So therefore, I know exactly what I'm going to get from Greg every day. I know exactly how Steve White's going to show up when I give him bad news. He's not going to shoot the messenger. He's going to welcome the information. So he's going to be consistent in his approach. So I wanted to add that piece to role modeling, consistency in role modeling.
Yeah, doing it once doesn't count, right? Doing it consistently, and when it's hard to do, right? When it's a hard conversation, when we're under the pressure, when the business isn't going the way, can you remain? Because we have a great saying: when someone shows you who they are, believe them. Right?
Yes. Yes.
And the failure in some of the historical leadership and parental lessons have been do what I say, not what I do. Which, man, what a stupid thing to say, right? Because it's the opposite. Do what I do, not what I say. Love what you taught. Love that you.
And Greg, can I add one other point
Sure.
to that? Is one of the things that I believe we're missing in leadership today, whether it's political leadership or business leadership, is vulnerability. None of us are perfect. We're going to make mistakes. But when you do make a mistake, go to your teammates and say, I made a mistake. I was wrong. I lost my way. Forgive me.
Say sorry. Like, it's such an easy thing to do.
And mean it. Of course, mean it when you say it.
Yeah.
But it's amazing to me what you give out is what you give back.
1,000%. The other thing that I liked what you said was you were invested, and you used the word involved, but you were invested and involved in the actual talent recruitment of the top 100. Who am I surrounding myself? Tribe of millionaires, right? Like, this is, I want better golfers around me. Right?
That's exactly right. You can again say who you are, but who you hang out with says everything. And you probably, maybe your parents used to say this, is I can tell everything I need to know about you based on who you're hanging out
1,000%.
I'm sure I didn't get the right words right, but you get my point.
That's the right line. That's the right line.
Who you hang out with that tells me everything I need to know about who you are.
Yeah. You know, it even came across of, I don't like that friend of yours. Be like, what do you mean you don't like that friend? No, that friend's not. And what happened? That friend was no good, right? So yeah. And then, you know, investing into culture, reward, recognition. The best recognition and the best reward, and I talk a lot about this, is go up and acknowledge someone. Thank you for the great day today. Right? Like, hey, by the way, I watched you in that meeting stress, and like, you know, you pulled it through. Well done.
Yeah.
Right? Just that acknowledgement, because people need to be seen, and it speaks to our significance and our importance, right? And of course, yes, the monetary rewards and the public rewards and all that kind of good stuff. Very cool.
But Greg, this becomes so critical now, because here in the US, there's this big discussion. Do I work from home? Do I come into the office? How many days do I come in? I truly believe if you have created an environment that is welcoming, that's exciting, that's purpose-driven, you don't have to come up with rules of when to come in the office. People will do it on their own because they want to be in that environment. They want to be around others. I'm not saying, people don't enjoy the flexibility. Everybody should have that flexibility. But fundamentally, if you have decided you don't want to go into the office, for a whole bunch of reasons, I would challenge you to think about, are you living your purpose? Or is that job contributing to your purpose? Because if it's not something you're excited about going in and being around others, because at the end of the day, life is about relationships, whether it's personal relationships or business relationships. None of us can do this by ourselves.
But that was the biggest effect of the pandemic, which was people's relationships. We all ran off, and I've been talking about this a lot lately, which is, one, as a business, it's our responsibility to get people back into a group environment. Okay. How we do that, yes, you don't want to be forcing people to drive through 2-hour traffic in the morning and, leaving at night. Like the one thing that the pandemic did show is that what business can continue in a remote hybrid environment. In a lot of cases, people are way more efficient, right?
Yes.
I think there's also wrong terminology around work-life balance. I think people sort of take that as a 50-50, and it never is a 50-50. It's what am I doing now to serve my purpose and invest, and we'll balance out a little bit later. But if we're not careful, right, we as businesses maybe force it too much where people don't want to come in, instead of what you just said, create the environment and invite them in, enroll them in, get people participating back in group environments. But I think it's highly important for us as individuals to recognize that we need to contribute to our community, and that requires me showing up. I mean, it comes back to accountability, right? It's not that you have to be in 5 days a week. You could live in a hybrid option, right? You could have the benefits and the advantages of both worlds, but like, get up, come in, right? Like, role model, show other people to do the same.
Yeah, and I love that, Greg, because one of the things that we talked about, this idea of a hand up versus a handout.
Right.
I have more mentors than most people can imagine. But here's the secret, Greg. Most of them don't know they're mentoring me. But as a young leader, just being in a conference room with, senior vice presidents and seeing how they think and how they talk and the questions they ask and how they interact with their teammates, I got to tell you, that was an invaluable experience. And also I saw how not to do it as well, which is just as valuable.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're always at home, and again, I'm not saying everybody's got to go in the office 6 days a week. I'm not saying that.
Right.
But understand there's benefit to being in an environment where you can see others, because they could be mentors, even though they might not be in a formal relationship with you.
Right.
Those are great opportunities to learn and grow. So embrace it. If it's 3 days a week, embrace it. If it's 4 days a week, embrace it. If it's 2 days a week, embrace it. If you're in a situation where they say you can work 100% of the time, that's great. But find reasons to get in that office, because ultimately, long-term, you will win and you will benefit.
Right. There's that Chinese proverb: if you want to go fast, you go by yourself. If you want to go far, you go with a team.
I love it. I love it.
Me too. I've been talking a lot about community lately. I think we need to push the conversation from culture, which we might say is attitudes and behaviors, to community, which is how am I showing up in this group and what am I doing to contribute to the success of the village, and that's all built on shared purpose, on a purpose and shared values, and organizational goals and individual goals, and again, it's about living in a group. We're as human beings, we are a herd animal or mentality, right?
Yeah.
Like, we live in a group. We've always have, and I always want to remind people of that, right? I, as an individual, need to show up with other people and create a group, and if we do that, other people will come too.
Yeah, Greg, what I love about the community piece is, in our lifetime, we will meet every single day 3 to 4 to 5 people, and we might not ever see them again. Maybe it's at the Starbucks counter, at the grocery store, or whatever. So think about this. When your time is up, on average, you will meet 80,000 people in your lifetime.
Right.
So we have a football stadium here in Denver called Mile High Stadium. And so I want our listeners to envision this football stadium is filled with 80,000 people, and you're walking through the stadium because your time is up and you're going to, as they say, the pearly gates, or, you're going to heaven or wherever. And they're doing one of 3 things, Greg. They're cheering because you made a difference in their life, and they're saying, Greg, 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 Greg. Or they're booing, boo, 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 because, your interaction is so negative.
Right.
But Greg, there's something worse.
Silence.
There's something worse. There's silence.
Right.
That means you were here and you impacted no one. Your fingerprints are nowhere. That they're sitting there in silence is, yes, I do remember meeting Greg at the Starbucks, or I do remember meeting Greg at the car rental place, but there was no impact.
Right.
A life
of no impact.
Of silence. There's this great phrase, we all die twice. The day they put us away, and the second is the last day they mention our name.
Wow.
What if we all strived for a life long after we're gone? I mentioned Darnell Martin, who made an impact. He's been gone 25 years. What if we all strive for a life that long after we're gone, at least one person, maybe 5, maybe 80,000 are still mentioning our name? That's a life of impact, success, and legacy. What if we all strive for that?
Wow.
That's a special, special place, Greg.
That is powerful, Steve. That is super powerful. And I'm a visual guy. And like, I was there. I was down the story. I was like in the stadium with you. Silence, that would be the worst.
Walking through that, your last goodbyes.
I'll share this very quickly. I had a very, call it tumultuous or difficult relationship with my father. Very brilliant man, but difficult dad. Anyway, he passed suddenly in 2012, and there were like 1,700 people that came to his funeral. And I looked around, I was like, holy, that is a lot of people. And he was in this business, right? He was a coach before it was called. And, it's very powerful what you just described. All right. At the end of the episode, we come to the most important question, which is the better human question, which is, what do you think we all need to do to be better humans tomorrow?
Put others first. There's in the Bible, it talks about do unto others as you expect them to do unto you. Right. And if you just think about whatever I'm giving out, I'm going to get back. That's a different mindset. Whatever I give out, I'm going to get back. And I know sometimes it's difficult, because I know in some cases we've been burned. We've been in relationships where that didn't happen. We gave and we got nothing in return. But don't give up. Don't give up. There are people that are open and willing that if you pour into them, they'll pour back into you in a way that is so fulfilling. Because this life journey, by going through it by yourself, is not inspiring. But doing it with others is so rewarding. So don't give up. Don't lose hope. Keep putting it out there. I promise you will get a return. Amazing.
All right. For the audience, I hope you like Steve. And if you're not following Steve, let's drop your handles and like Instagram and website. Great. Where can people get in touch with you?
Great. Please, first of all, go to my website, stevewhitespeaks.com. Everything you need to know. My book that came out last year called Uncompromising. You can read excerpts of the book. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. All of those handles are right there. But go to stevewhitespeaks.com. You'll find all the information you need. And if you're looking for a great book to read, go to Amazon or wherever you buy your books. It's called Uncompromising. And I talk about 7 pathways to a life of success, impact, and legacy.
Amazing. That's amazing. And we're going to have all these handles and the links and everything in the show notes as well. So for the audience, you could always go and click that. But Steve White Speaks, you're going to find him everywhere on YouTube, on Instagram. Go punch that into Amazon, pick up his book today. If you like today's conversation, I'm sure it's just a preview of what's in the book. Very exciting. Steve, I really, really appreciate your time. Thank you for being here today.
Greg, thank you so much. And I appreciate everything you're doing. Making humans better humans. What a purpose.
Trying to, and doing it with others like you. All right. Awesome. To the audience, if you like today's episode, as usual, like it, subscribe to it if you haven't done already, the show, and share it. Send this out. It's like a good book. When you listen to a good podcast, go and give it to a friend and let them listen to it as well. Stay happy, stay healthy, and we will see you next week.